Sonora and I like write to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and she asked if you were stressed about tax season, and I was like, well, she's in
Not that
private, so
kind of
probably not.
accountant. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
that's
do
what I told her.
taxes. I use TurboTax just like everybody else.
Do you
Apparently,
understand how taxes work though? Like more, you think, or like the same
no.
amount?
You pay your taxes. You pay taxes, and then at the end of the year, they say, "Did you pay enough taxes?" And I say, "I don't know." And they say, "We don't know."
You tell me.
And then you say, "Well, shit, that's stupid." And then I'm always like, I mean, just like when I'm filling out the FAFSA, I'm paranoid that I'm
I'm
gonna fill
gonna
it out wrong,
lie on
and I
accident.
am not gonna get anybody. So. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm Hannah.
I'm
I'm
Caitlin.
Abigail. No,
Of
I'm
course, you're
Abigail.
saying right at the same time.
Well, usually I go last, but it's weird. Can we like stick to going in age order?
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
No, because then
No,
Keelan
it's
has to introduce it. Okay.
you bet your
I'll go
ass I'm leaving all
last.
of this in.
I'll
I'm.
just always go last.
Can you tell that we've had to introduce ourselves a few times in age order for some reason? Okay. I'm Hannah,
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Abigail.
and welcome back to another episode of Who, What, Where, a true crime podcast. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
Dude,
You
okay,
don't have to
so
do the music. I can edit the music
Yeah, I
in.
got that.
Okay.
Got that.
well, it's not as fun. So also guys, fellow listeners, I love Bailey Sarian. Shout out to fucking Bailey Sarian. She is G. She's my favorite human on earth. I painted and that's all I listen to. But her theme song like kills me every time. Like the shana 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 shana
So after we
shana.
recorded last week, I had that song stuck in my head like all day the next day. I was like,
Really?
where did I hear that? Like, I
It's
don't know what that is.
yeah, it's Bailey Sarian's like theme
There
song.
we go. This is a plug
Anyways,
to Bailey Sarian because she totally needs us to plug her.
she does not, and
Get it straight, guys.
I'm very proud of her growth, but like she doesn't need our our plug. That's true. But shout out to you, Bailey. You're a G. I really appreciate you this week. She's totally not listening, but
So, in honor, I feel weird saying in honor of Women's History Month because we're talking about
a
um
murder,
like
Criminals.
criminals,
female
Yeah.
but
criminals.
I guess in honor of women everywhere who haven't murdered their boyfriend or husband, we're going to be talking about someone who
Oh,
did.
shit.
And we know you are walking a thin line between murdering him and just forgiving him.
So
So, like, shout out to you.
I
the
feel
funny
like it's
thing,
crazy nowadays because I'm like, do people not know that divorce exists anymore? Like, I
yeah,
feel
back in
like that's
the
the logical
70s,
explanation.
okay, you had a little bit of an excuse, but now, come on, let's get it straight. No, I
All people, how, let's say this, everybody who has ever been in a relationship with a man, shout out to you. Shout out to you.
There you go.
You're
The Women's
you're a
History
good
Month is
human.
dedicated to you. No, for
If
real,
you have ever loved a man and
I mean,
regretted it,
I kind of feel like that's kind of the point. Is like Women's History
of
Month is
Women's
about
History
like
Month.
it's kind of
literally,
like
it's
fuck men,
it's about women who have
being suppressed,
survived, like in
oppressed,
the United States,
suppressed,
well, in the
oppressed.
entire world, oppressed.
On this week's episode
Suppressed is
of
like a
We Don't
suppression.
Know the
What we're
Dictionary
talking about.
or how to no. I
Hopefully,
mean,
everybody
okay.
realizes we're joking.
So
I
I
mean,
just
we're
want you
joking
all to
about most
know,
of it, but Women's History Month is in honor of women everywhere who have
right?
survived in a patriarchal society.
Oh,
Also,
true. I was just
that's
joking about
like
the murdering your husband thing.
Yeah, don't do that. But we are going to talk about a
don't
murderer
murder
today.
people.
Hey, folks.
Today, we're going to be chatting about Jodi Arias, which I feel like there should be like a dun 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 because I feel like everyone knows who
Bad
Jodi
bitches.
Arias is.
I
Do you two
am
know
not.
anything about her? If you want to
I am
share a
really.
little bit.
I'm really not that familiar with this case at all.
Okay.
Actually,
I've seen Bailey Sarian's episode on her, but that's all.
Okay. So basically, just as like kind of where I did my research. So I Jodi Arias, her case, her trial, I guess, occurred kind of like right at the beginning of when social media was super like popular, like in the
True.
mid-ish 2000s.
Mhm.
Sorry, the mid like 2010s. I forget 2000s is entire decade, century, millions of years. I don't remember. Anyway,
Century.
Uh,
Wait, million? What?
so
It's
anyways,
space.
guys, please skip forward.
her case was very popular in social media, and so I remember like hearing about a lot of the stuff, not even in real time, but back in like 2010, 2015, right? And um so her case got a lot of publicity, and then now that it's been a while, things really haven't died down. And as we know, you're here listening to a true crime podcast, but true crime is kind of super popular again, in the past, like especially in the past like couple years or so. And so
Mhm.
there has been lots of documentaries, docu-series, whatever you want to call them, about Jodi Arias. So I am a true connoisseur of every streaming service available. And so I have Discovery Plus because why not? Why not pay the same amount you would pay if you just had freaking cable for all your different streaming services?
Literally. They're
Um,
gonna just combine all of them at some point, and it's gonna be back to where we started.
yeah, and then we're gonna start all over. I truly think humans. I know we were just talking about how women are smart, but I think
I don't
humans are
know about
stupid.
that.
They don't learn.
Yeah. I think it's actually kind of amusing to me for sure. So
Yeah. But anyway, on Discovery Plus, there is a documentary about Jodi Arias, and I sit down to watch it with my boyfriend Connor, and he goes, "We've seen this before," and I'm like, "No, there's no way we have. Discovery Plus is a new streaming service. There's no way we have." And
Hannah's an ad.
turns out we had watched a different Jodi Arias docu-series previously. So I feel like I know a lot about Jodi. I don't,
Jodi.
but to be fair, also for most cases that I research, I do like a lot of reading. I don't like reading, by the way, guys. By the way,
Hannah
y'all,
hates reading, just so
I
you
don't,
guys all
I don't
know.
like reading. I'm trying to read more. We're in a book club together, but I don't like reading.
God.
So let's just accept
Hop right
the fact
into it.
that all of my research for this was essentially documentaries. So
Good job, Hannah.
I did look up the day she was born though, because I don't think they told us that in the documentary. Jodi Arias was born July 9th, 1980 in Salinas, California, to parents Sandra and William Arias.
Oh, so she's not even that old.
No, she's
No.
young. You don't
She
even,
was
do you
young.
know? Yeah, she was young.
Apparently, I know nothing about this. Now that I think about it, I don't think I know anything.
William went by Bill. I might call him Bill later on. I don't know. So I just want to let you guys know that he is also goes by
He's the
Bill.
same person.
The same person, yeah. She had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and from kind of like an outsider's point of view, doesn't really seem like anything's wrong with her childhood. She has kind of that perfect American family vibe right there.
Mhm.
So she had a really normal childhood. She was apparently super happy and very sweet, kind of angelic, like in all the pictures you can see of her when she was a child. She's just always smiling. But as we know, knowing now what we know that Jodi did, it's kind of important to note that I think that we saw a lot of the outside beautiful view of her being all happy and sweet, but there was a lot going on inside. So a lot of like family friends described her as obviously super happy and nice, but then a lot of times people would talk about her spacing out when she was a kid, like just kind of dissociating, and that will come into play a little bit later. And there is speculation, especially like from Jodi herself. So I guess it's not speculation. There is stories of her being pretty badly physically abused by her father, Bill. So let's talk a little bit more about Bill. Bill started having health issues like around the time that Jodi was in high school. And apparently there were really bad health issues, bad enough that her mother, Jodi's mother, Sandra, decided that they should move to Wairika, California, to be closer to her mother's family.
Did
So
you just say Eureka really weird?
no, it's Wairika. It's
Okay, I was making
Yreka.
sure it was different.
Yeah. They
I was
moved
concerned as well.
Yeah, they moved to Wairika.
That's
a
how it's
weird name.
pronounced?
Yeah, that's what they said in the show. Anyway, they moved to Wairika, and it's a very, very small town. So Jodi is in high school in this super small town in California. And it, in a small town, if you guys aren't from small towns, there is it's hard to move to that town when you're in like high school or older, because all these kids have known each other since they were like
It's
born,
really
essentially. Coming from personal experience, like
Oh, yeah.
people have literally, they were born in a hospital bed right next to the other one,
Their
and
best
like
friend.
they've gone to
and their
school their
moms
entire
grew up
life
together. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So she had a really hard time in high school getting along with other people, and just she felt she had very much that like teenage angst of, my parents are ruining my life, they made me move here, blah blah blah, that kind of thing.
Sounds like a real gem.
And she was really struggling a lot with a feeling of belonging. She didn't feel like she belonged anywhere, and she missed all of her friends, obviously, from her childhood and her previous school.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when we kind of, in our timeline, as an outsider, we see that the home life is not really picture perfect like it seemed, at least like on paper. So Bill was aggressive and abusive with all the children, not just Jodi. This is all speculation, technically, because these are stories that Jodi has told, but there's not like evidence necessarily.
So it's like an unreliable
Couldn't
narrator.
believe her.
Yeah. So a lot of it was just in the way that he would discipline the kids, was very aggressive with spanking and that sort of thing. So we won't really get into that, whether or not you agree with spanking your child, but clearly it affected Jodi, or at least she thinks that it affected her. And eventually her father started using a belt and other items, so like a belt or a spoon, to beat the kids. So then it kind of crossed a line of like, oh, I'm just spanking them with my hand, to I'm hitting them with a belt or a wooden spoon.
Just makes me so annoyed.
So again, because of Jodi's circumstances, she was really emotional, and she had a really big temper, is what family members described it as. And she would essentially, as like a 16-year-old kid, would throw temper tantrums. And so she fought with her mother a lot. I am not 100% sure if the fights were ever physical or if they were just emotional, like screaming matches, basically. But
And
to
an
be frank,
extent, I feel like that's pretty normal for a teenager.
and that's what I was going to say. To be frank, fighting with your mother when you're 16 or 15 or whatever is not that unusual, I don't think. But so I also say this because Jodi is the kind of person that when she talks, and when you hear her talk and hear her testimonies and stuff, you really start to believe her, right?
Oh.
And so I think she used that a lot to her advantage. But I also think that, just like as listeners of this podcast, I think it's important for everyone to kind of take everything that she says with a grain of salt, because I don't know if I believe her. Sometimes I do. Some of the things she said, I believed her. Some of the things I was like, that can't be true. But, I just think that it's important to note that she seems perfect from the outside, but clearly something was going on in there.
Yeah.
To do the things that she did.
So the more you talk about this, I feel like this is like a early true crime case that I remember. Like, I think I remember hearing about this when it first happened.
Yeah, see, like I said,
Yeah.
when it occurred,
Like, I think that's my memory of
was
it.
kind of the beginning of of media essentially like ruling everyone's lives and media
'Cause
being
this
at the touch
happened-
of a hat or drop
This
of a
happened
hat.
around the same time as Casey Anthony's thing,
Oh my
didn't I
God.
think?
Oh, Casey.
Timeline wise, I'm pretty like it was like within a couple years.
2008 was when the crime occurred. So
Yeah, and I think Casey Anthony, that whole thing was like 2009.
2006. Okay, I don't know.
9 and 6 I get confused, just like when you're playing Uno, friends. Okay.
Okay.
There's a line under it.
Yeah, I know.
Well, does the line go on the bottom or the top? I don't know. Just kidding.
What?
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
Also, though, guys, I haven't taken any of my meds today, so bear with me.
So
Or
anyway,
freeball it.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I could watch that documentary on a Monday and be like, yeah, that girl's crazy. I don't believe the thing she says. And then I could watch it on a Thursday and be emotional and be like, I totally believe her. Like she really,
Yeah.
like you don't, I still don't know. And I also think that, I'll just wait for that part, but I don't think she got a really fair trial. So
Oh.
she started rebelling a lot, obviously. So she, was typical like movie. I hate my parents. They're ruining my life. I'm never going to talk to them again. I'm going to run away, that kind of thing. So she started smoking weed. Oh, by the way, I think it's important to know that if you guys want, I feel like I'm a walking ad for Discovery Plus, but if you guys watch the documentary, the entire thing is narrated with like a woman's voice, obviously like pretending to be Jodi, using
Oh, interesting.
her diaries. So she kept a lot of like journals
Ooh.
and diaries, and that's how they knew like a lot of this information. So she started smoking weed quite a lot, and she actually started growing it in her house with her parents living there as well.
Oh,
I feel
interesting.
like it's like a weird flex. I think this is when she's like 16, around
Okay.
that age.
Get it, girl. We've all been there. No,
And
that's not true.
we've not been there. We have
Sorry,
not.
take that part out. Guys,
Sorry,
I'm
but-
just gonna take my medicine really quick. I'm losing my mind.
And obviously because it's hard to start a growing operation in your house with your parents. Her parents
Obviously.
found out, and they called the police, which I feel like
That might have been an
little over the top.
overreaction.
like and so this is really when family members, herself, whatever, they describe it as this is when like this was the breaking point, the tipping point kind of, where she never trusted her parents again. Like she hated their guts now, because they not only did they find out about her secret passion, I guess, and like the way she was kind of coping with her surroundings and her life, but they called the police on her. Like instead of just taking it away and saying stop growing this, they called the police. So
Which they knew would like ruin her life. Yeah, I don't know about that. But I mean, if she was like seriously unstable and like was a crazy teenager and like the parents were like afraid what she would do if they confronted her instead of calling the police, like I could see both sides.
I have some beef with parents calling the police on their children when something's not an actual threat to others. Like if your kid's like trying to fight you, that's a different story. But
yeah, I
calling
mean,
the cops on your kid like for being a delinquent, you're the parent. Like you are the reason. Like
they're
you
just
know what I
trying to
mean?
teach him a lesson, but like they're going
It's a
to
fear like mongering thing.
yeah, they're going to another level. Like they're not just saying, okay. I mean, I feel like if you told your child to stop growing weed, like maybe they would just do it. I don't know. But I think that it's possible that we don't know necessarily the whole story. Like I said, it's possible that Jodi had gotten maybe physical with her mother specifically before in the past. I don't know if the fights that she had with her were physical or verbal only. So if she had gotten physical with her mom in the past, maybe her mom was in a way afraid to confront her about something.
That's what I'm saying is like,
yeah.
If it was like that kind of situation, I can see why they called I'm plus 16. Like it's not like she's that young. Like she's old enough to have adult consequences for things, but
Yeah.
Nah.
Anyway, nothing came of it. She wasn't like arrested or anything. But now, kind of the next puzzle piece to Jodi Arias's life and how she ended up the way she did is her dating history. So I'm basically going to give you a brief dating history, and then we're going to come to a conclusion paragraph of sorts. Okay. So she started dating a man named Bobby, a boy
Okay.
named Bobby. So
Okay, I'm like, man.
she ran away. She dropped out of high school, ran away, and started working as a waitress. And around the same time, she started dating this guy named Bobby, who was a total like outcast. He only wore black. He was kind of a loner. They lived in like a trailer together, which was just completely like a mess, like a pigsty. And all the photos, at least it looks like that. They were making it appear that way, I guess. And she really cared and loved for Bobby. And she took care of him. She was basically like his mother. A
How
friend
old was he? The
around
same
her
age.
age.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said man and it threw me off a little.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
She did everything for him. She cleaned, cooked for him. She was basically like his mother. And a friend described it as essentially, in order to keep Jodi around, being like his chauffeur and driving in places and doing all these things for him, he had to like kind of give her little bits of affection every once in a while.
Oh.
And so it obviously wasn't a healthy relationship. And she eventually found out that he was cheating on her. So clearly this really affected her, and she was super depressed. And she talked a lot in her journals about hating herself and being just like completely disgusted with herself, which is horrible because she, was pouring all this into this man, and he cheated on her. He was unfaithful. So she eventually
been there.
left
Ooh.
him. So then Jodi and Daryl met and they started dating. So Jodi met Daryl. What's his last name? Shoot. I didn't say Bobby's last name, but
Threefold.
Daryl Brewer. His name was Daryl Brewer. And he was like a food and beverage manager at the Ventana Inn and Spa, which is where she was working at the time. So she quit her job as a waitress and moved a little bit further away just to kind of get away and have a fresh, clean slate away from, the town that she ran away in and away from Bobby, and just, move on. So Jodi met Daryl when she was working at Ventana Inn and Spa, and he was older than her. He was, I believe, divorced, and she was just this young, beautiful woman working at this inn. And they were immediately like attracted to each other and started dating each other, obviously. And everyone described it as they looked super happy together. They were always holding hands. They were totally in love. And Daryl had a son. She eventually, or she kind of became like a stepmother figure in all the pictures. At least it seemed like they got pretty serious pretty quickly. Like she was around his kid, all that. And apparently, where their relationship went wrong was her whole life she had pictured, having the perfect American family and getting married and having kids. And apparently he didn't want that. He didn't want
He didn't want any more kids.
Yeah, he didn't want more kids, or at least he didn't want to have children with her. So
that's even worse.
So Jodi basically took two really intense hits, one after another. Not literally. Well, anyway, with Bobby and then Daryl. And when she broke up with Daryl, they apparently left on pretty good terms. They were still pretty friendly with each other. But she just knew that she had to go her separate ways and things weren't going to work out because they just didn't want the same things, right? So it seemed like a pretty mutual situation where they could still be friends afterwards. And this is when Jodi met Travis, kind of like when Harry met Sally, but way worse.
When you said that name, I was like, wait, that's the guy that dies.
Yes. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
let me note really
Spoiler,
quickly.
Caitlin.
Here is the conclusion paragraph I was talking about Jodi's love life. You can probably guess what I'm going to say, but she so badly just wanted to be loved and just wanted attention and care from a man. And this will kind of come into play later with her relationship with Travis, but she, you know, kind of, she was willing, and this is even what friends and family kind of described it as, of friends and family of Jodi, that she was willing to essentially change who she was just to please a man, just so that she could finally have that love and affection that she so desperately wanted. Which, as much as like we would like to say, oh, I would never do that, she clearly, or at least in her mind, didn't have necessarily a good relationship with like her father. So basically the conclusion is Jodi Arias probably had some daddy issues, and then she also like potentially had so deeply rooted issues with herself that she didn't want to, that she didn't care to change her personality. Like she didn't care if she was going to change who she was, if she's going to completely uproot her life, moved to be with a man, as long as she was finally loved and in a relationship, getting married, having kids, having the whole 9 yards kind of thing. So in that sense, this is kind of what I'm talking about in the documentary, is that like I could make you feel bad for Jodi. At this point, I kind of feel bad for Jodi. It seems like she's not had the best life, and she obviously is not very comfortable with herself, right? So right at this time, she met Travis, and Travis was born on July 28th, 1977 in Riverside, California, to Gary and Pamela Alexander. We won't really go too much into his childhood because I don't think it's that important. I think what's going to happen now is more important. So Jodi met Travis at a prepaid legal convention in Las Vegas. So do you guys know what prepaid legal is? Let me tell you. Let me give you the spiel.
No, I have no idea. I'm excited.
Prepaid legal. So let me just say this too, because I think it's funny, and I'm not sure if we're going to have an entire hour of stuff to talk about unless I add some little fluff. There is a man in the documentary who I believe his name is Chris, and he is clearly probably still a part of this company, Prepaid Legal. And he was a really close friend of Travis. And when he gave the spiel about what Prepaid Legal was, it was like he was giving a sales pitch. And that's basically what Prepaid Legal is. For just $25 a month, you can have legal services at your fingers. Fingers? What would you say there? Fingertips? Fingertips. I wrote fingerprints in my notes. You can have legal services at your fingertips. So it's basically an MLM where you recruit other salespeople to sell this $25 a month plan to have legal services. Okay.
So I have a question regarding like what kind of person needs an on-call lawyer?
Not a great one.
I need to know. I need to know.
and it's just weird.
But it also makes you question, like, wait, should I have an on-call lawyer?
Yeah. So I think the weirdest part about it, arguably, is the fact I have an issue when an MLM and legal services are overlapping. That sounds wrong.
I have an issue with MLM, like,
I just feel like that
worse than other.
That crosses a line a little bit. But anyway, that's just my understanding of prepaid legal. I didn't really research it that much. I literally just looked at the website and it says start a business. So to me, that means it's an MLM. Anyway, okay.
Honestly, that's not a bad conclusion at all.
So I think it's important to note that Travis did not recruit Jodi. That is not what happened. They just met at a convention. Jodi being kind of the free-spirited young woman that she was, she started working for Prepaid Legal. And again, also because she was so just kind of willy-nilly and she could just dive into things and give up her entire life, her entire personality. She wasn't tied down anywhere. She became a really good salesperson, I guess you could say.
She was
Yeah. So
flexible.
she went to this legal convention in Las Vegas, and Travis was a super seasoned member of this company. He would give speeches. He was kind of at like his prime, I guess you could say. And Jodi had just become a member of this. Mind you, none of these employees of Prepaid Legal that I'm talking about are actual lawyers. Okay. They're just salespeople. And
So they're just selling the legal services. So
yes,
who are the legal services?
there's a
Different
team.
people?
There's a team of legal services. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
So apparently, according to a lot of like friends of Travis and Jodi, there was a immediate connection between the two. There's like this video that they show a few times in the documentary where they're all like sitting in like a hotel lobby chatting, kind of like what you would do at a convention. And she's like laying on his lap, like she has her head on his lap. And mind you, they just met, days previous. So there was a really immediate connection. And part of that had to do, at least Travis's friends think this, had to do with the fact that she was really driven. So she really wanted to become a better person and have a better business. And Travis was really attracted to that because at the end of the day, he was like at his prime and he wanted to be a businessman. He wanted to have lots of money, basically. Um, and Travis was extremely successful. And obviously, like on the flip side of that, Jodi was super attracted to that too. And not mind you, both these people, or not to mention, I guess, both these people are really good looking. Travis and Jodi are both attractive, and they're both young, and they're both kind of ready. Well, not really, actually. We'll get to that.
I also want to say though, I know this is probably like kind of a mean conclusion to make, but any true crime case that involves like an MLM just makes me think of like Chris Watts and how like nothing good happens at a convention.
Yeah, I think that it's
I think of like Nexium.
And
Yeah.
Nexium, yeah.
Yeah. So kind of what I took away from the documentary at this part where they're talking about how he's so successful and Jodi's just just starting out kind of thing is he chose her as a lover, I guess you could call him,
I love it.
because he saw that she was so motivated, right? So this is kind of the first time in her life, at least seemingly, that she was worthy of like a man who was so like was in his prime and really wanted somebody that wasn't just like arm candy, was kind of more of his intellectual equal. And
Okay, yeah.
because if that does that make sense? That was kind of
Yeah.
rambly, but basically she was finally wanted for something more than her good looks. So, and both of them immediately saw potential in a relationship, and they became intimate pretty much immediately. I mean, if you couldn't tell already by the fact that she was laying on his lap, like after they had just met, like they had a very like instantaneous connection, both physically and like kind of mentally. Now, plot twist, Travis was a Mormon, a practicing Mormon. So
Oh, so it's
this
what
is
that
weird,
other
right?
case?
I don't know.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I do.
When you
We
said
listened
that,
to the
it clicked. I
podcast.
have heard this. Okay.
Yeah. So Travis was a Mormon man, and he throughout the entire trial was this amazing Jesus loving godly man. He was the perfect Mormon. He would never do anything wrong. And so of course the prosecution, is that correct? the prosecution painted him as, this devout Mormon who, like, he wouldn't hurt a fly.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
We can't believe someone murdered him, right? And I don't want to get hate or whatever, but take that however you want. Whether or not you believe that he actually was, that's kind of what is up to question, and that's what the defense, Jodi's defense, brought up in the case a lot. Anyway, so Jodi was not a Mormon. You guys probably know that already. But
Wait a minute.
are you like little brain connectors, like connecting now? And
No,
you're like,
I
oh,
think
I
it's
think
a
I know what
different
I'm
Brain
case.
connectors.
I think those are called
I don't know.
neurons.
I
But
remember
anyway.
No,
listening to a podcast on the way home with you guys, one of you guys from Seattle, and like it had to do with some Mormon guy, and they were into
Might
some
have
like
been
freaky
this.
deaky BDSM stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
There's
Oh,
your
this is-
neurons. They're connecting. Yeah, let me get to that part
Oh
though.
shit!
It's gonna be a
Okay.
minute.
I'm excited. Okay, go ahead.
So Jodi was not a Mormon when they first met, but as we know Jodi to be, she would do anything for a man, especially
He was a people pleaser.
especially a man like Travis, who was the entire package and then some, right?
Yeah, like quote unquote everything she wanted.
Yeah, that was all she ever wanted in life. And so immediately she kind of starts going into being Mormon, and she's talking to the church. I don't want to talk about Mormonism that much.
There's a
but
lot of processes.
there's a lot of
have
processes.
to
You
go
can't
into
just
it.
become a Mormon,
You don't get
right?
to just mhm.
You have to be essentially like, it's almost like you have to study and then take a test, which is whether or not you're getting baptized, kind of. So
Don't you have to like prove knowledge of
yes,
like
Yeah.
the scripture and the Book of
Exactly.
Mormon and
yeah. So the church, questioned her, not in a weird way, but I mean, sort of in a weird way, but not
I feel
in
like
like a
everything is in a weird
not
way in
as
this
like a
case.
police officer would. They just like questioned her and was like, what do you believe in God? What do you believe in? Blah blah blah. And she said that she believed in God, but she wasn't necessarily religious, something kind of along those lines. But she
So like most people in
a
America,
lot of
a lot of
are like
people.
that, yeah. And she, again, like I said, because she is a people pleaser, she immediately was like head over heels for this Mormonism. And she just really wanted to become a Mormon. And so she was doing all of the readings, she was like studying the scripture, and she was progressing, I guess you could say, in the eyes of the Mormon church. There was a pastor or an elder, I guess they're called in the Mormon church, on the show that was like, yeah, everything that all the questions she was asking made it seem like she was reading and she was understanding and she like really wanted to learn. And so there were no red flags really there, except for the fact that maybe she was learning too quickly. Like, I don't know. And she was baptized by him. So Travis baptized her, which, woohoo, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. That just seems a little weird.
And so now, like,
be baptized by your lover.
they kind of had this. They had this super strong spiritual connection. They had a really strong physical connection, and they
It's
had like an emotional,
yeah.
mental connection. They connected on like a business level
It's
or a
little
life
trio.
goals level, kind of. Now,
The trio of murder.
let's get into the topic of like, was Travis really this amazing guy? Because I think that
depends on who you ask.
The answer is no, y'all. The answer is no.
He was murdered, so I don't want to talk like ill will about someone who's dead, really. And it's obviously not a good thing that he was killed. I don't wish that upon anyone, but I do think it's important to bring up kind of who he was, aside from what the media portrayed him as this amazing Mormon, fabulous man. Okay. So let's just start with the basic fact of the fact that he was a Mormon, but he immediately started having sex with Jodi.
Which
and
we don't have a problem with.
Yes,
having
yeah,
premarital sex.
yeah. But I guess if you're coming off as this, devout Mormon to the public, but you're sleeping around, and I will say too that he this was not his first like relationship that he was ever in where he was like intimate, and nor was it a committed relationship, though they were intimate. I feel like in that case I might be able to see it a little bit more, but you know how I mentioned earlier that they, had this instantaneous connection and they both were like super ready to commit? Not
It's
Travis.
almost like it was lust.
Yeah, they did not start dating. Like he would not commit to her. But of course, Jodi, being who she is, was fully invested into the relationship and was, this was her lover.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like back in like Queen Mary of Scots time, when like the men like had all these mistresses, but they didn't want to marry women that weren't virgins.
Yeah, so and it's unfortunate because Jodi was portrayed as this very like seductress, and she was sex positive,
Corrupting
and
him.
she was corrupting this devout Mormon, and she was really portrayed as that, when in reality Travis wasn't like all that. Like it wasn't like, first of all, sex takes two people, duh, hello. Mormons might not know that, I guess, but it does.
I don't think never mind, I'm not gonna say
And
that. That's mean.
he there was videos on the documentary that they showed of where they showed like him like kind of partying and being this like playboy, and like calling on women in the audience and saying kind of suggestive things to them. And just really in that 2-minute clip I could tell that he wasn't what everyone was making him out to be.
Right.
And now it gets to the question of, okay, so what? I guess, yeah, he wasn't a devout Mormon, but was that wrong? Is that wrong? Does that, like mean anything?
It might be like the issue of like if the prosecution was, or no, his
Using
defense.
that as like,
if Travis's defense was like saying,
no, that was
like
the prosecution, Travis's prosecution, and then
sorry,
Jodi's defense. So you were
yeah.
like,
Anyway, Travis's I think the issue with all of this is if Travis's prosecuting team, like if the people that were prosecuting Jodi Arias were trying to make it seem like they were like lying, I guess is like the issue. Like if they were like, oh yeah, he was like a devout Mormon and he was like a really good man and she was like tempting him.
well,
like
see, I think that's
they were
exactly
lying.
what they were doing.
If they were
used,
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If they were using that as like a character building like scenario, that was untrue. And so it was like really the defense's obligation at that point to point out that that isn't true,
I agree. And I think that it would have gone different. Like, I don't think that the defense would have brought it up unless they had used it as like prosecution.
And another thing that Jodi's defense brought up that I think is important to note kind of at this point in the story is that let's think about this if it was the other way around. If a man had murdered a woman and was showing us the same exact information, so just if Travis was a woman and Jodi was a man, like what would we think then? Like would we think the same exact way? Would it be way harder, which I think so, like to kind of spin the narrative? I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Anyway, so now being that he wasn't a devout Mormon like everyone was saying he was, that's not necessarily that horrible. But now we have to question, like, okay, if Travis's the prosecution is lying about who Travis really was Travis kind of putting on a front? Was there something that we didn't know about him? And that the answer is yes. I don't know how to say that in a better way. In the trial, there were dozens of emails, texts, chat messages between not only him and Jodi, but him and other women. The ones with other women were pretty like sexually suggestive about like, oh, send me a pic, you make me so horny, that sort of thing. Like a teenage boy back in 2015. You know how it'd be. Anyway.
Except he wasn't a teenage boy.
He wasn't a teenage boy. He was a full-grown man.
Right, I forgot.
That was a devout Mormon. So in the text message, some of the emails, chats, text messages with Jodi, He used some specific words, horrific, where he would call her a whore, a bitch, a three-hole whore, or like a three-hole wonder, that sort of thing.
He's a great devout.
He told her multiple times that she was worthless and asked her, "Are you even human? Why would you do something like that?" Stuff like that, or why would you even think that? Weird stuff like that. And he also, after they kind of like ended their relationship, so basically they met and became intimate in September 2006. They didn't start officially dating until February 2007, and then by the time all of this stuff went down, the murder, they were not technically seeing each other anymore, but they were still having sex with each other. They were still talking all the time. They were still, for all intensive purposes, like in a relationship, but they had technically broke up, and she had moved away. She was trying to distance herself from him. But he would text her like, "I told you not to ignore me," or "How dare you ignore me," things like that, and say, I saw you flirting with other men, or I heard about you flirting with other men. Very like jealous and possessive, and she would essentially say, "Yeah, but like so do you," sort of thing, because obviously he does. So really weird stuff. As far as him being physically abusive, because I feel like we've kind of confirmed that he's emotionally abusive, she did say that he was physically abusive to her, but again, like I said, some people believe Jodi, some people don't. Kind of depends on what day it is, almost. She's, I don't know. Anyway, in court, she said that, he would throw her down, he would kick her. There was one time that he kicked her and she had put her hand up to like shield her, and he kicked her hand and now her finger's all crooked. I don't know if you guys have seen the video, but she like shows her finger in court and it's like all like that kind of. I don't know.
No, I haven't seen that.
But again, it's like, is she lying? Is she not? There is no proof of the abuse. I'll say that. She never wrote the stuff in her journal, which is weird because she journaled everything, and she never reported any of this to the police. So it's totally like he said, she said kind of thing. Like, oh, of course, Travis isn't abusive and all that. Or, okay, yeah, maybe he was. It depends on who you believe, really. And
But
of course,
I
he
mean,
did murder him. So
yeah.
probably wouldn't believe her. Most people don't, and that's exactly what happened. That's what played out in court too. She did say in her journal something kind of
Cryptic.
no, it almost like poetic about the situation, because like I said, she didn't explicitly ever say he abuses me, he's kicked me, he's hurt me, blah blah blah. But she did say something along the lines of, he explodes, like freaks out, says he's sorry, they make up, and then everything is fine a little bit before it happens again. So it's like this cycle.
Sounds like an abusive relationship.
Yeah. And
when I feel like there's probably not a lot of men that are solely emotionally manipulative. Like,
it's usually both.
That's probably not super common.
Yeah. But but Jodi just wanted to be loved, so she just kept going with it. She probably didn't even really realize. And her defense lawyers are in the show, and there was one point where they said something like, okay, like, what do you have? Like, we know that you killed him. We've come to that conclusion, but what do you have to say that it wasn't like first degree murder?
Yeah.
So it came down to, was this first degree murder or was this manslaughter? Did she kill him in self-defense? And obviously her defense, doing their job, was like, what do you have about him? And they were like, did he ever say this? Did he ever do this? And she would say yes, and then they would be like, oh, well, that's abusive. And she'd be like, is it? Like, she was clearly, I don't think she understood,
interesting.
really. She didn't have kind of a idea to go off of. She probably didn't have very healthy relationships in the past. We know she didn't have one with her husband. Not husband, father.
I was
So
like, I missed her being married.
so at some point, this is kind of, I know we've been talking a lot about Travis and how he's kind of the bad guy. At some point, Sky and Chris, who Chris is the person I talked about giving the spiel about prepaid legal, they stayed with them a lot because they were kind of like a middle point between where Travis lived and where Jodi lived. So they would stay at their house a lot, like as like a midpoint. And Sky and Chris both were like, we're really concerned about Jodi. She's super possessive of you. Like, we need to have a conversation about it. And so they all sat down together and they started telling him these things that Jodi's been doing. And Travis, of course, is like, I don't believe you. I've never seen any of this stuff happen. This isn't true. And then Sky, the woman in the relationship, and Sky and Chris are married. She starts describing, she's like, I have this weird feeling. This is what happens in the documentary. I have this weird feeling. I think Jodi is standing right outside the door. She's like mouthing this to Travis and Chris. And of course, Travis is like, no, she's not. And he goes and stands up, pulls the door open super quickly, and she's standing right there. And she's like, is something wrong? Like, super kind of creepy. And so immediately after the murder happened, of course, Sky and Chris like came to the police station and they're like, I don't care who you think did this. It was Jodi Arias. And so I just have to say it because I think it's important, because we kind of been painting this picture about Travis being possessive and jealous and emotionally manipulative, but it kind of sounds like it's possible Jodi was being that way as well. Like, to be honest, it just sounds like they had a really, really unhealthy relationship, no matter how you slice it. But of course, Jodi snapped, I guess. So,
So the thing is the now that I'm kind of remembering what this case is, the podcasts or the documentaries or whatever that I've heard about it, the ones that I've heard are, they very much are like, well, Jodi, I think, was this like crazy ex of Travis's and she was obsessed with him and he was like too nice and or scared or both, whatever, to tell her like, I'm not into you. Like, a lot of people I've heard have like, they frame it in that she was like this crazy obsessive ex.
Which I really don't see it that way anymore.
I think a lot of
especially
women get
after I
framed that
watched.
way.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what they brought
It's-
up too, is that
It's a little misogynistic, I think, to frame it that way at this point with what we know. Like, you can't, it's very like women hating to be
We know
like,
he was to some degree abusive, whether it's
they were
emotionally or
both
physically.
abusive, possibly to each other too.
yeah.
Okay, so all that being said, you guys everyone who's listening probably already knows that Travis is dead. He was murdered by Jodi. Okay. But now let's talk about actually like the murder, and then really quickly we'll talk about like how she confessed and what her story was. Whether or not you believe that is your own issue. So the big piece of evidence that, if you know anything about this case, you probably know this, is that there was a camera that was found in the washing
With
machine.
weird ass footage.
Yes, I
inside of
remember
Travis's
this.
home.
Yeah.
So
Now I know
This-
it's the same thing I was thinking.
these photos were of the night of Travis's death. And they were photos of not only Travis naked, but also Jodi completely butt naked. Okay. And they were all taken. There was one set of photos that were all taken in bed, like they were taking photos of each other. Side note, Jodi was super into photography. She had like always had kind of an interest in it. So they were like kind of artsy photos, I guess you could say. And then there was a second set of photos on the camera where they're in the shower. So a couple minutes later. And again, she describes wanting to take the photos in the shower because it's, artistic kind of thing. And then there's a third set of photos, which are accidental. These are like, there's one where the camera has clearly been dropped and accidentally gone off. And then there's photos of her or somebody, guess depending on what you believe, disposing of the body, basically pulling the body like down the hallway. You can see that he has blood on him at this point, and there's only about like a minute and a half or maybe even less time in between the photos of them in the shower or him in the shower to the photos of where you can see his blood and you know something's like wrong. So kind of just interesting. So on July 15th, 2008, Jodi was arrested because she was guilty. I mean, clearly, it's pretty clear at this point. They had photos of her, right? So she, at the time of the murder, she claimed, which is true, she was doing this, that she was on a road trip to Utah. It was part vacation, part business trip, she said. And she claims that she got lost for around 24 hours. Strategically, this was the time that all this stuff was allegedly going on, that Travis was being killed. And so she claims that she didn't know where she was, and she was, sleeping in her car. And this was essentially her alibi that she was setting up, that she didn't know where she was, so there was no way she could have been at his house,
even though there's photos of her.
Yeah. And this is in the interrogation, this is basically where he's like, well, I have photos of you like there on that day. And kind of the look on her face is, she's just like, what the heck are you talking about? Like she looks stunned because she's been outsmarted at this point. And she says, first thing she says is, are you sure they aren't from another time? Because she's not denying that her and Travis weren't like intimate previously, or they hadn't taken pictures, but she didn't think it was from that time period. And then she also said, are you sure it's me? And then he shows her the photos and he's like, I'm covering up this part of the photo because, well, like, it's all of you. He says something like that. And he shows her the photo and she's like, oh, that looks like me. That's what she says. And obviously at this point it's pretty like cut and dry, but I do think it's interesting that, well, not interesting, but I don't think it's that interesting that she lied. I feel like that's very common. People do that all the time, like when they first are talking to police, because
the thing with her is that, isn't the big thing with her is that she just like would constantly lie about things that she didn't necessarily need to lie about, like,
yeah, like she's a compulsive liar.
Yeah. That's totally possible. Yeah. So then of course she's crying, and then she says, this is going to sound really shallow of me, but before you take me, can I clean myself up a little bit? That's what she says. And
I remember.
Of course he says no, but whatever. That is what she originally like was booked on, was that statement that she essentially didn't know that she was there that night. That wasn't her. And eventually, this is the story she goes with. She changes her story a lot. So I guess what you said, Caitlin, about her constantly lying is pretty true. So eventually she gets interviewed or interrogated, whatever you want to call it. And the interviewer or interrogator is like, I know you don't want to be treated as a cold-blooded murderer, so I need to know what happened. And she's like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to be treated as a cold-blooded murderer. And she says, I really wish I could change what happened, but this is what she admits to. She says that she showed it. This is not the final story, right? This is like the second of 3 stories. She says, I showed up to his house. She had called him prior, so he knew that she was coming. She didn't surprise him. And she said that she was super tired, and so they went up to the bedroom to sleep. And they slept until about like 1 a.m., 12:30 or 1 a.m. And she said that throughout the night they had sex multiple times, so in the bedroom and then also like in his office apparently. And she asked to take pictures with him in the shower, and he first said no, he wasn't going to do that, but then eventually, of course, he obviously did. We know he did because there's pictures. And she says that when they moved to the shower to take photos. She was sitting there taking pictures. This is like completely ridiculous, but this is what she said. I don't know, crazy, I guess. She said, I was sitting there taking pictures of him in the shower, and she felt a strike, like someone hit her. Okay. Then she says, I don't know what happened, but I think that there was a shot fired, like someone was shot. I know. She says, then I saw two people, a man and a woman, wearing ski masks. That's all she could remember about them, like that they were wearing ski masks. So like she watched a freaking movie and was like, yeah, this is what happened. And one of the people, the man or the woman, said, you must be the bitch from California. Like, this is what she made up.
It's very specific.
And said to her, if you told anyone about this, that they would kill her family in the same way they killed Travis. So she gets up, runs away, and leaves. Okay, sure, Jan. And obviously this is a lie. Like, this is like completely ridiculous. Anyway, who are these people? Like, I don't know. So my first thought is that I think that she was kind of trying poorly, mind you, she's poorly trying, but I think she was trying to kind of frame Sky and Chris, the people that they used to stay with, that thought she was crazy and that were like the first people to tell the police, because she did say it was a man.
Oh,
I don't know, it's weird.
interesting.
So next, this is what actually happened. So this is what she eventually said, and was like what the trial was based on, was that it started out as self-defense, but it just went too far. Like, she kind of just snapped. So Jodi had found out that he was being unfaithful. Like I said, they had a technical breakup, but they were still seeing each other and they were still intimate.
Usually
And so
when you're like religious and you're intimate outside of marriage, you would think that that meant you're exclusive.
yeah, so and like I said, they technically were broken up when he cheated on her, but they were still sleeping together. So clearly, like I mentioned, probably wasn't a very like mutually understanding breakup, or
Sounds familiar.
it was sort of a case where he was not that into her and she was more into him. I don't know.
That fits like the narrative of like she was like his crazy ex.
Yes.
But I have seen that it's like it's weird for him to have been that old and not married as far as Mormonism goes.
Might be something
And
wrong
it's
with
probably
it.
because he was kind of sleazy and he was sleeping around.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and he wasn't really being like, it's not like he started dating someone else. Like, he was just sleeping with anybody kind of thing. And he kept her around as his side chick, sort of. And like I mentioned about the text messages, all those text messages about like, how dare you ignore me? Clearly he's still into her and he still wants her to be like his.
I think it's a control thing. It has nothing to do with like
Yeah.
no, it's like he wants to control her. He wants to be in charge of her because religion is patriarchal in its origin. All religions are.
So anyway, he said basically, or him being unfaithful isn't like a main point, but it is kind of possibly what caused her to be like so angry with him.
It's motive, yeah.
Yeah, but in the on the day, apparently they were taking photos and they apparently did this a lot, that they tied each other up, or he would tie her up when they were like having sex. And so he went to go get a rope, and the rope was too long, so he used a knife to cut it. The knife is important because Travis was stabbed 27 times and his neck was sliced from ear to ear.
Damn.
So assuming
Holy
this
shit.
knife. So he cut the rope, tied her up, they had sex. Then she wanted to take pictures of him in the shower. So they went to take pictures in the shower. They were doing a bunch of different poses, and she was trying to get these like artsy fartsy photos, like I said.
Sorry, I don't know why I laughed.
At this point, she says that steam causes her to drop the camera, and Travis starts shouting at her and is super pissed off, which Again, it's
Doesn't sound that
do you believe
surprising.
he was abusive or not? If you believe he was abusive, that sounds probably pretty normal. It's his camera. He dropped a camera. Not normal, but it seems like something that someone who was abusive would do. Drops a camera that's probably worth thousands of dollars or $1,000, and he freaks out on her. It's like a Canon, like a DSLR camera, by the way. And
That's like an actual camera.
yeah,
Not like
she says that at this point, he picked her up and body slammed her down on the tile in the bathroom. And so she claims that she got up, ran to the closet, and she remembered that Travis had a gun in the closet. So she grabbed the gun from where he kept it, and he was chasing her around, which, like, I don't know what to believe. I'll just say that, and you guys can take it however you want. And so she grabbed it, pulled it on him, and like had her hands like on the trigger, pointed it at him, which, if you guys know anything about gun safety, don't put your finger on the trigger unless you know you're going to shoot somebody. And she said at this point, she was, shaking, she was freaking out, holding the gun, and he lunged at her like a linebacker, like to tackle her, like at her legs. And at this point, the gun went off and she shot him. And this is where the like psychologist, the lead psychologist on this case, says that Jodi started to dissociate. So she doesn't remember anything that happens after this. Like, basically, for all we know, she blacked out for like 24 to 48 hours. Because the next thing she remembers is waking up in the middle of the desert. So in her car. Like, she had drove into the middle of the desert, fell asleep from probably pure exhaustion. Yeah, that's what she claims that she remembers the next thing doing. So clearly, after the gun went off, she must have stabbed him 27 times, slit open his throat, put him back in the shower, disposed of the camera, put it in the washing machine, left, and she claims she doesn't remember doing any of that. IDK. Anyway, so the main thing that they had that this, well, aside from the fact that Travis was possibly abusive, the other main point that the defense, the main point that the defense
kind of both people are guilty.
Yeah, the main point that the defense tried to make, aside from, like I said, the fact that he was possibly abusive, was that the crime scene was super messy. So her hair and DNA were everywhere. Her own blood was there. Probably from stabbing him so many times. She probably hurt her hand. Anyway, so this really, at least this is what they were trying to prove, was that this supports a crime of passion and not necessarily a premeditated first-degree murder. Mm-hmm. So that's really what they were trying to prove at this point, because she did kill him. We know that. Yeah. So she is guilty of that. But then they were saying, okay, did she drive all the way to his house, lure him into the bedroom to have sex with him one last time and then kill him? Or is it true what she said? Is her story true that she actually like had this like attack, he attacked her and then she accidentally killed him? Well, accidentally shot him and then stabbed him a bunch of times. That's pretty much it, but I do want to say a few things about like kind of the sentencing and then whether or not Jodi really had a fair trial. So this became an entire media frenzy. There was people out in front of the court chanting with signs. The prosecution, they were like out there taking photos with fans or people that were, so this is like lawyer 101, do not do this. And they were out there, talking with people. They were obviously seen as the good guys in this case because Travis was the one that was killed, not the killer.
Because this happened in Utah, right?
Arizona, I think.
Is there a difference? I'm just kidding.
Hold on.
I think we just think it's Utah because Mormon.
She was on her way to Utah. Yeah. Okay. Killed him in his home in Mesa, Arizona.
Okay. I couldn't
but same difference, really. And so they're it's hard to imagine that the jurors were not biased.
Skewed.
Yeah, skewed.
Biased, yeah.
So once they found her, they eventually did find her guilty of first-degree murder, which I don't personally agree with, but whatever.
I think it's way more likely that it wasn't premeditated.
I'm
Like,
just not
there's
even
no
sure
evidence of
I-
premeditation.
I'm not even
I'm
sure how they
on the same team.
they proved that it was first. I don't think there's enough evidence to prove it was first-degree murder, but
No, there definitely wasn't.
now it was
There
the
is-
question of whether or not it should be a death sentence case. Technically it could have been. So eight of the jurors supported the death penalty, and then 4 supported life in prison with no parole. So
Holy
because
shit.
because it wasn't a unanimous decision, she ended up getting life imprisonment with no possibility of parole.
8.
Yeah,
Wow.
so out of the 12, 8 supported death and 4 supported life in prison.
Wow.
So it
um
it sounds like because of all the publicity, like the jurors were like they had already made their minds up before they got into the courtroom.
Well,
So now listen to this. When we talk about whether or not Jodi had an unfair trial, I would vote no. I would vote yes. She had a very unfair trial. It was not a fair trial. There were multiple witnesses that claimed that witnesses in favor of Jodi, I guess if you could even be in favor of Jodi, but witnesses that were being threatened by people that were out on the street outside of the court, and the defense lawyers themselves were also being threatened. So
Oh,
luckily
wow.
they stuck
Weird.
through, but
That's so weird.
clearly the media
Played
and
such a big role.
played too big of a role in the case.
Oh,
Like
for sure.
media plays a big role in a lot of cases nowadays, but it was to the point where it blocked the case from being fair. So I'm not saying that Jodi is not guilty of killing someone. She took a life and she should be punished for that. I agree with
Right.
that, but there was a huge it was extremely unfair. And like I said, they painted her as this sex crazy woman who, and as we know, people are very quick to judge women who are sexual or like sex positive. And so
Well, and it says a lot that
this way.
like
And of course so that made it easy for people to be on Travis's side. So
yeah. Well, and it says a lot that the other, I don't remember who this podcast was from. I think it was a podcast. It says a lot that they were framing it like she was really into all this BDSM stuff and
he wasn't.
And he wasn't, you know.
Which is not the
Yeah,
case.
like almost like she was like coercing him.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that's the case of Jodi Arias. I kind of try to take more time explaining like the background and not the actual like murder itself. But because Jodi Arias, like her case or Travis Alexander's case is like one that I hear talked about all the time. Obviously, there's lots of documentaries about it, so I kind of want to just take a little bit of a different spin on it and focus more on some of the other details. But it's crazy. I don't know. I think that certainly my mind was changed a little bit from like the first time I read about her and heard about her case versus now. I think that there's probably, at the very least, I think that there was too much media involvement to the point where Jodi didn't get a fair trial. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Don't forget to like and follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube. Our YouTube and Instagram are the same thing. It's Who What Where Podcast. And on there, on Instagram, I try to post photos of like relevant images. Our Facebook is also Who What Where Podcast. And you can follow us there too. I post the same thing on Instagram and Facebook, so I guess it just depends which one you like more. And then YouTube, you can listen to our podcast on there too, kind of as just another podcast platform, I guess. So, and you can leave us comments there as well as Instagram and Facebook. But thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you in the next one.